Fox News alert overnight, the Trump administration securing another win, announcing a major tariff deal with China. Trade will be one of the major issues on the agenda. When the president makes his high-stakes trip, and the first one to the Middle East, he's going overseas today. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt joins us now. Caroline, we're just mentioning there's probably 7 major stories. I know I'm going to disappoint somebody by not bringing it up. First off, your reaction, and what could you tell us about the China deal that has tariffs dropping from 145, 125 respectively to 30 and 10?
This is an extraordinary first step in the right direction. And thanks to the strength of President Trump, Secretary Bessent and Ambassador Greer were able to cut this initial deal with China. China agreed to reduce their tariffs on the United States by 115%. They also agreed to continue having discussions about opening Chinese markets to American-made products and goods. And they also agreed to continue seriously discussing the grave impact that Chinese-produced fentanyl is having right here in the United States and our people. So this is a great first step for the American public, and Secretary Bessent, Ambassador Greer, and of course President Trump will continue negotiations with China so we can hopefully inevitably get to a fair and comprehensive big trade deal.
Do you know yet, Caroline, if they're going to unfreeze their rare earth and the magnets that we use for our technical equipment as well as our military equipment?
I do understand that was part of the discussion, but I also know that the administration is working overtime 24/7 with a dedicated team to onshore that very critical supply chain here at home. We need to be producing those magnets, those rare earth minerals, and also look at pharmaceuticals, look at semiconductors. There are critical supply chains that we have been dependent on other countries for far too long. So while we continue to negotiate these good and fair trade deals, we will also continue to boost our domestic manufacturing here at home to strengthen our national security.
All right, so we got the UK deal, the framework for a China deal. Is there another deal queued up, ready to go today before you leave?
Well, look, we told you the next 100 days would consist of peace deals and trade deals, and that's exactly what we have seen. The president announced last week the big trade deal with the UK, as you mentioned. Now we have a first deal with China. Just yesterday, the president announced the release of the last remaining American hostage in Gaza, Eden Alexander, who will soon be united with his loving family. God bless him. That's thanks to President Trump. We also negotiated a ceasefire with the Houthis, and President Trump was instrumental in negotiating a ceasefire with India and Pakistan. This is all in the last week. President Trump and his team are working incredibly hard on behalf of the country and the world to secure peace deals and trade deals. And don't forget, we have a tax deal coming too. The administration is working with Capitol Hill to sign the largest tax cuts in American history right now.
So this pharmaceutical deal, I'm just going off the Truth Social posts. It says, it's a long one, but he says, I'm pleased to announce that today, the White House at 9 o'clock will be signing one of the most consequential executive orders ever. They will be reducing pharmaceuticals by about 80%. Essentially, we are going to pay less than the country that's paying the least for pharmaceuticals from here on in. How does that work?
First of all, it cannot be overstated how big of a deal this executive order that President Trump will be signing in a couple of hours is for American families, and especially our seniors who have been ripped off by very large and rich pharmaceutical companies. The United States of America is less than 5% of the world's population, yet we purchase 75% of Big Pharma's profits. We pay an astronomical amount in comparison to other countries around the world. So the president is signing an executive order today that is going to implement most favored nations drug pricing, and is going to reduce the cost of drugs in this country by more than half at least. America is going to pay a better rate and a fairer rate to the rest of the world. That's what the American people deserve. This is huge news. And also, I will add, we know that healthcare costs and drug prices were the #1 driver of Biden inflation. So not only are we bringing those down, but we are ending Biden inflation once and for all.
Can you clarify that Qatar is giving us a new Air Force One as a personal gift to President Trump? Are they gifting it to the country? What could you tell us about this luxury liner that looks like a hotel in the air?
Well, the Qatari government has graciously offered to donate a plane to the Department of Defense. The legal details of that are still being worked out, but of course, any donation to this government is always done in full compliance with the law, and we commit ourselves to the utmost transparency, and we will continue to do that.
Do you worry that if they give us something like this, they want something in return?
Absolutely not, because they know President Trump, and they know he only works with the interests of the American public in mind.
So, Caroline, it was a great Mother's Day, I imagine, for yourself, even though you have like 8 major news stories happening. You published a few pictures, posted a few pictures. Can you bring some color and some light on what Mother's Day meant to you this year?
Well, it was my first Mother's Day, and it was incredibly special. I had a great day with my baby and my husband, relaxing family day, as now I'm headed off to the Middle East with the president. We're going to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE this week. More big economic deals and peace deals to be announced. But yesterday was a beautiful day. Lots of news, but still a fun day with my family. Thanks for asking, Brian.
Is the baby going?
He's not going. He's going to stay nice and safe here in the country with his dad.
He could use the miles, you know. It would be
he
helpful.
Has plenty, trust me.
Oh, he does? Okay, good. Caroline, thanks so much. I mean, I've never seen a day like this. So it's going to be fascinating to see the details unwind about unfurled on the trade deal with China, as well as we didn't even talk about the Iran talks that took place in round 4. So thanks so much, Caroline. I appreciate it this morning.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld, along with Kayleigh McEnany, Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Waters, and for her birthday, they had a stripper jump out of a cupcake. Dana Perino, the 5. President Trump wheeling and dealing before jetting off to the Middle East, giving a 1-hour and 8-minute presser where he riffed on everything from big pharma to getting a truce with China by cutting tariff rates for 90 days.
We achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue in the largest structural issues. They've agreed to open China, fully open China. And I think it's going to be fantastic for China. I think it's going to be fantastic for us. And I think it's going to be great for unification and peace.
47 also signing an executive order directing drug makers to lower the prices of their medicines to align with what other countries pay, and kindly using his tubby friend to illustrate his point.
A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up. I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
So true. And Trump smacking the liberal media silly for making a stink over the prospect of Qatar gifting him a luxury jumbo jet to use as Air Force One, after Boeing failed to deliver one on time.
What to say to people who view that luxury jet as a personal gift to you? Why not leave it behind?
Your NBC fake news, right?
Why not?
It's only ABC. Well, a few of you would. Let me tell you, you should be embarrassed asking that question. They're giving us a free jet. When they give you a putt, you say, thank you very much. You pick up your ball and you walk to the next hole.
I don't understand that sports analogy, Jesse. You can explain it to me. So the market is back up over higher than, I think the first of the year, higher than Liberation Day. But we went through this conflict where the media was pulling out all the hair and Harold was pulling out what's left of his hair. Was it worth it? What did we get out of this?
Well, we're about to find out. Right now, there's a structural deal in place where we have 30 to 40% tariffs still in place on key defense sectors and key industries, autos, pharmaceuticals, steel, things like that. And that's what this was always about. Over the weekend, Greg,
yes,
I was reading Adam Smith.
Ah, I love him.
The father of capitalism, wealth of nations. He said he wasn't a free trader. He was a strategic trader. He said there's 2 instances where you want to put tariffs in place. When you want to protect key defense industries, that's what we're doing here. And 2, to keep certain domestic products competitive with foreign products when they're dumped illegally. I was actually getting that from ChatGPT.
I figured it was either that or Grok.
What was I doing, Greg, at 3 a.m. on Saturday?
Oh, I'd hate to find out.
Nothing good.
I was watching Scott Bessent announce this deal. Not because it's a great deal, which it is a great deal. I just don't want to hear this guy talk about tariffs anymore. I'm sick of it. He's been wrong this whole time. Trump says this is the most beautiful word in the world. I like deportation.
But, you know,
I like Doge.
Bessent also said that the other problem that we don't have now, China ignoring the trade laws because they didn't respect Biden.
So they admitted in Switzerland that they didn't agree to that first phase one Trump deal because Biden never enforced it.
Yeah.
He never even tried to enforce it. So funny, they're polar opposites, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Trump loves risk, and he's a deal maker, and he's self-reliant. Joe Biden lived off the taxpayers, is afraid of risk. And I remember during the first vice presidency, they sent him over to Iraq to cut status of forces. He didn't even get that done.
Yeah.
He didn't get Mexico to help with the border.
All right.
He got ripped off with Brittany Griner. Remember that deal?
Yes, I do. But now we're talking about Joe Biden.
Sorry. It all goes back to Joe.
Harold, I know it's only 5:04:50, but in your face early because we sat here and argued about the stock market's never going to come back up. And here we are.
Well, first of all, it's good to be back around the table. Happy Mother's Day again, belated to everyone. What we argued and debated about was whether the three goals that the president laid out from the outset of this, which was three things, I believe. One, to reshore manufacturing in the United States. Two, to raise tremendous amounts of revenue. At one point, President Trump, I believe, said that this could raise upwards of $500 to $600 billion worth of revenue in a year, and over a 4-year period. We can do the math as he was talking about Doge. 4, reduce our reliance on China and supply chains outside of the country. Jesse, to your point about Adam Smith, reducing our ability, or I should say, preventing nations from dumping goods in America that would allow our domestic manufacturing to grow and to prosper. That is one of the primary reasons, if not the reason you impose tariffs. We don't make the things that we are blocking China from bringing in, or for that matter, other places. I wish we did more of it. In fact, that's what we
make steel?
No, but we ought to be prepared.
We don't make automobiles.
We do, but the parts in automobiles come from all across the world, Jesse.
No, I understand that. That's why we're trying to protect them, so China can't dump them.
Understand, but if we were making them, you have to be making them.
Okay, well, so what about the $5 trillion investment announcements that have come in for manufacturing?
They're great.
$5 trillion investment commitments for high-tech manufacturing.
The most important word,
automobiles, pharmaceuticals, aerospace, defense,
But Jesse, they're commitments. We don't have the workforce. We don't have the factories. We don't have the capacity. Dude, I love it. But the truth of the matter, Adam Smith was right, and you should read it more closely. Finally, as we think about, and I don't mean to be critical, but as we think about the president,
we agree that Adam Smith was right.
We do, and so much so that we're not even close to what he was talking about.
Adam Smith on the show.
We should.
But understand what happened, Greg. He blinked on tariffs. That's why the markets come back. But the challenge is we have punished supply chains. We've made it difficult for small and big businesses to forecast how they're going to invest, whom they're going to hire, and set prices. I hope I'm wrong, but you know who validates what I'm saying? You ought to get ChatGPT to ask you what Adam Smith said about setting prices.
So you're smarter than Scott Bessent, and you're smarter than Lutnick and Donald Trump.
No, you know,
and all the people that are cheering the trade deal, they're wrong?
But they're saying they love the fact that we removed ourselves from a tariff war with China. I'm not saying I'm smarter than Scott.
We're still at war. We have 30 to 40% tariffs. We have a fentanyl tariff.
I'm not saying I'm smarter than Scott Bessent. I'm not saying I'm smarter than any people, but I do know one thing. I don't work for Donald Trump. So I can tell you what I believe is a fact. Him today,
you do kind of when you're on the 5.
him blinking on tariffs and China blinking on tariffs has helped the market come back and give us some uncertainty.
We're going to have to get you to a room. Kaylee, you're analyzing for 2, so go ahead.
I am. Yes, I am. A big one growing. Again. Thank you. You know, Harold, there are things that we need to make. And I know this because I was in the White House in 2020. And I was there when our strategic national stockpile was depleted. And Trump said the cupboards were bare, and we didn't have ventilators, and we didn't have N95 respirators. And he had to go like this and just come up with them to save the country and save lives. And Scott Bessent, one of the things people missed about what he said at 3 a.m. when most of us were sleeping, Greg, maybe you were up, you have a baby, is he said, I want to reshore critical supplies like during COVID. It's a big win for the American people. But look, you know, I think the bigger picture here is when I think about the Sunday to Monday turnaround. Like, I'm watching John Hamm last night, this new show, you know.
Friends and Neighbors.
Yeah. It's a little hot for my liking. But nevertheless, I'm not reading Adam Smith like Jesse on my weekend. But I'm doing the lazy things most Americans do, and then we snap into work and we go to work Monday. I was with Dana this morning. Trump, however, on Sunday night is doing most favored nation, revolutionizing pharmaceuticals just before he announces a freed American hostage, just before he wakes up to a massive China deal. This man is reshaping society in the time that it took Joe Biden to take a nap in a beach chair in Delaware. And every day, if you go all the way back to Tuesday with the Houthi announcement and then the ceasefire in India and the UK agreement, every 24 hours, there's a major, major win for the American people. And it is nothing short of impressive.
You know, Dana, it always seems to me that the criticism on Trump will always be the same. It's not about the results, it's about the process. Did we really have to go through all this with deportations or DOGE? Now it's trade. It's always going to be about the process.
Yeah. On the deportations, I think that obviously that one's a good argument to be having. People are like, that's great. We started off talking about Wall Street, but initially, like, we were all saying, who cares about Wall Street? And my concern from the beginning has been small and medium-sized businesses, and across the board, they are like, whoa, what are we doing? Because even if it's 30%, they got all their stuff out there. They had 2 to 3 weeks margins. They're already laying off people. So maybe this puts a halt to that, and I hope that's the case. China's got big problems. They have the fact that they have a housing crisis. They have an employment crisis now because a lot of factories have laid people off. They have a health and energy crisis, environmental crisis, I should say. They have more energy than we do. I think that's partly because of their regulatory issues. But they're also savers and not consumers. And that was the big thing that changed over the past 30 years. There was a belief that if you give people the freedom to make more money, that they would buy things. They don't. Why don't they? Because they have a terrible social safety net, and everyone saves all their money, but then they can't buy anything with it. They don't want to buy stuff. So there are changes that can be made there. The other thing is, when you look at, for example, I don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but just on the most favored nation thing, the drug thing, I'm old enough to remember Obamacare and what all Republicans fought against and why there was a Tea Party in the first place is because we didn't want socialized medicine. Now, there are some people even back then who said, but actually this drug thing, that could actually work. What I would love to see is something I haven't seen anyone talk about be a big deal, especially with Europe. If you want the fat friend to pay the same price, well, one of the reasons that you have to remember, you lived in England. Do you know how much they pay in income tax to have a terrible healthcare system? It's probably $1,300 by the time they add it up, that the medicine versus the thing. This is what I would love to see. I think President Trump should try to make the Europeans take reciprocity with our FDA.
Yeah.
Then you would see great research and development, great
values. We're paying for all the R&D.
Right. So instead of making us then go through FDA approval, their equivalent in Europe, you should take our FDA approval. What's wrong with our FDA? And if we did that, all of us would save so much more money and we would cure more diseases.
Such a good point, Dana. Put that in your good point journal.
Thank you.
Fat Shot. This is a great name.
That was so great.
Fat Shot. All right, ahead. Democrats claim they got roughed up after storming an ICE facility, but the tape tells another tale.
Welcome back. Just minutes away from the closing bell. Take a live look at the markets here. Having a very good day after President Trump announced what he's calling his total reset with China. It includes, obviously, a 90-day pause on most of the 125% tariffs, with more talks coming soon.
We're not looking to hurt China. China was being hurt very badly. They were closing up factories. They were having a lot of unrest. And they were very happy to be able to do something with us. And the relationship is very, very good. I'll speak to President Xi maybe at the end of the week.
Let's bring in Dagan McDowell now. She's host of The Bottom Line and co-host of The Big Money Show on Fox Business. Dagan, it's great to see you. You know, so much we could talk about with the China policy stuff just in general, but I guess the bottom line, would you like that? The bottom line right now is the stock markets seem to like what's happening.
Indeed, Julia. It's a reset, reprieve, rollback, relief rally, let's call it that. If you look at where the Dow is right now and also the S&P, all your major market gauges, the markets are above where they closed on April 2nd, Liberation Day. when President Trump announced his vast tariff plan. So you think about all the rough and tumble days and weeks since then. If you had, as an investor, just done nothing, not sold, just held, you would be above where you were at the close on April the 2nd. So the bigger picture is this is good news, and certainly a 90-day break between the United States and China. And China was suffering mightily with riots, factories closing. China had cut off data from the rest of the world, so the world couldn't see how bad its economy was. This is all good news to come together with a trade policy that benefits the United States first, and hopefully, as President Trump points out, fully open China to American businesses wanting to operate there.
Real quick, the president says this may be the best part of all of this. He says this is in response to China promising to cut out shipping fentanyl into the United States.
They promised to do that when Larry Kudlow and Bob Lighthizer brokered the deal during the first Trump administration. So China has unleashed fentanyl on the United States in addition to COVID, which killed more than 1 million Americans. So there's much for China to be held accountable for. Fentanyl, COVID, and stealing our intellectual property and closing off its nation to U.S. businesses. I could go on, but I won't. But today, the market rally, this means that the U.S. is okay. Can I add one quick thing?
Right.
April
Dagan,
customs, yep.
We got to go. I'm
Okay.
so sorry to cut
That's
you
all
off,
right.
but we got a really important reader we got to do before we end the show. We will have you
Go.
back shortly.
Go.
Love talking to you. Thank you.
Now, joining me now on all of this very busy weekend is someone who knows the president pretty well. It's the host of My View on Fox. It's Laura Trump. Laura, thanks for being with us here today. Quite a series of events, and that doesn't even include what was announced this morning on the price of pharmaceuticals, which we'll get to a little bit later here on the Will Cain Show. But when we look at this list of things that were accomplished, largely in foreign policy, let's start with China. Tell me what the big win is here for this 90-day pause and a potential new deal with the Chinese.
Yeah, well, listen, Will, first of all, if you just take a step back and look at all of these, incredible feats that you just described, these happened over the course of a weekend. One of these alone would have been enough for any other president to spike the football for weeks on end, right, and celebrate that sort of a victory. Donald Trump doesn't have time to do that. He's focused on actually delivering and getting these very important things done for the future of this country and the future of the world, quite frankly. You know, you talk about the China situation. How many people just a few weeks ago on the left, in the media, of course, even some friendlies, got a little nervous about all of this talk with China, about the 145% tariffs that we saw put in place? Donald Trump said, look, somebody's got to have the guts to do the right thing here. And yeah, we're going to see over 90 days if we can come to a firm agreement and see ultimately what happens here. But we've got to level the playing field for the American people, for American companies. We know how many of them have gone overseas to China. We know we are not getting the best of the best whenever we get things from China. We want to make it here, and we want to give the incentive to our people and our factories right here in America. So, look, let's see what happens with this. I think it is a huge, huge signal that there's more positive to come, and this is such a big win for the country.
Well, I appreciate you taking a step back, Laura. I really do, because we can take for granted the action under President Trump. It's been over 100 days now of almost constant action, constant offense, constant accomplishments, and all of these, as you pointed out, would be hard to imagine under the previous administration and the previous presidency. And you're tempted to dive in, which I want to do so now, but to just step back for a moment and say, look how much is actually happening in a short amount of time is worth note. But on the potential for a deal with China, you brought up friendlies. I think I saw someone post this today, Laura. They said there's two big losers in this Chinese trade deal. One are the people that thought that Donald Trump would drive the economy into a recession because of this trade war with China. But the other is those that thought there might be some big grand chess scheme to get global markets reimagined and bring manufacturing back to America. So the question really is that still in play? What concessions have we gotten, and what concessions will we get from China?
Yeah, well, look, if you just take a look over the past few weeks and you talk to a lot of manufacturers and companies here in the U.S., they'll tell you that as a result of what has already occurred, as a result of those tariffs initially being in place, they've seen a lot more product coming from their factories. They've seen a lot more people turning and saying, you know what, we're going to go with an American company because it's, you know, not in our best interest to seek things over in China or overseas anywhere, quite frankly. I think that is still a big part of the play for President Trump. Look, hire American, buy American is sort of the motto he's always used. And yeah, we want to get things level with China and with every other country. But the ultimate benefit, I think, will be not just to the American consumer, but to the American manufacturer, to the American worker, because we do believe that we are going to see China maybe buying products from us. Imagine such an idea, you know, seeing other countries seek our products out instead of vice versa, which it's been obviously for far too long.
What I would love to see is some progress made on the problem with fentanyl coming over from China, the unfair trade practices, the intellectual property theft coming from China. And we'll see if these concessions are accomplished over the next, as you point out, 90 days. Really quickly, Laura, he's headed to the Middle East. He's going to meet with a lot of Gulf countries. This comes as an incredible accomplishment, getting the last suspected American hostage who was alive back home in Edon Alexander. And here he is set, possibly the same type of thing that just happened in India and Pakistan on the doorstep, maybe in Ukraine and Russia. Constant action. What will be the action that we celebrate at the end of this week?
Well, look, I think having a great relationship with the Middle East is a very positive thing for the whole world, but especially for the United States. And if you remember, he had a very big trip to Saudi Arabia. I think it was his first overseas trip during his first administration. And that's been a beautiful friendship and a beautiful relationship, of course, for President Trump, but I think for the American people. We want allies in that region. We want to make sure that people are on the same page as we are. And I think if you talk to many of those other Middle Eastern countries, they'll tell you they are not in favor of this Israel-Hamas situation. They are not in favor of what they see Iran doing. And we want to have people on our side. We want to keep everything, as we use the word friendly with everybody. And I think that's going to be the result, of course, at the end of this trip.
All right, Laura, we'll be watching you on Saturday nights. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's a reset of tariffs. I just want to make this clear. Now, that's good. It's down from 145 to 30. It's a reset of the tariffs. Calmer heads are prevailing. We are talking to China. That's a good thing. And the stock market is saying terrific.
Yeah.
Keep it up.
All right, so I would say he sounded pretty optimistic, Larry did, for now. That was last hour when he reacted with us after the U.S. and China agreed to lower tariffs for the next 90 days, a temporary truce, if you will. All right, looking at the Dow, it is, wait, look at this, highs of the session. Yep. Robert Wolf is here, former economic advisor to President Obama and a Fox News contributor. Brian Bremberg is co-host of The Big Money Show, and we're here chatting away on set. Okay, so Brian, to you first, because I was watching you on my little screen over here on FBN over the past hour. You guys were obviously closely watching the stock market.
Indeed.
It is back above the Liberation Day levels.
Yes.
Okay, so all that selling, we've recouped that now and we've moved higher. What does all of this tell you?
Well, a couple interesting things. One, if you held on and didn't panic, you're in pretty good shape right now. But number two, think about this, okay? You've still got 30% tariffs on China right now. Amidst all this, you still have 30%, but the market is back up to those levels, as you said, at Liberation Day. So what I'm seeing here is a recognition that there's a tariff on China that small businesses can handle, medium-sized businesses, large businesses, investors can handle. There's a regaining of trust and understanding about what the president's doing. Uncertainty is getting pulled out of this equation, Sandra. And I think that's really important because if you take this environment, think about it for a second, take this environment, add on continued deregulation, you add on a big tax cut if it comes, and you get trade deals with the other big trading partners, the second half of this year, if the China thing can hold, could be a really great second half of the year.
It feels to me, Robert, like that's what the market is betting on. If President Trump could get at least this done, maybe there's more deals coming down the pike.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to be disingenuous. You know I couldn't stand the trade wars, and I was dead set against across-the-board tariffs. I wanted them targeted. So something like today I'm happy about. I agree with Larry.
Larry Summers said the same thing, by the way.
I'm in agreement with Larry.
Larry Kudlow.
All Larrys. that the reset's important. I would just say, to Brian's point, The reason the market's back where they were is because we're back where they were. Remember, we had the 20% fentanyl tariff on China. Even during the Biden administration, the 10% across the board went to everyone. So we're actually right where we should be. I like the idea that it's a 90-day pause. I wish it was a 180-day pause. I think we have to figure out how to deal with our frenemies on this. And China is the biggest frenemy we have. We have to work with them on some things, and we have to be complete adversaries in other things. I think we should stay tough with China. But I don't think we should have been across the board, because I'm going to say what a lot of the Republicans say, like Steve Moore and others. It was a tax on the consumer. We're a 70% consumer-driven country, and so this was incredibly onerous. And that's why people were talking recession. The market today is saying, hey, maybe a big reversal here. I hope
well,
it
there
sticks.
are some questions whether or not he was sort of pushed into this. Edward Lawrence chose to ask the president about that. Are you letting China off the hook with this temporary pause? Here's the exchange.
Are you letting China off the hook for these 90 days, and do you really believe that they will follow through with non-tariff barriers and remove those?
Yeah, I think they're going to follow through. I think they want it very badly. I think they want the deal very badly. Again, this doesn't include the steel tariffs that I put on a long time ago. Now we have a thriving steel industry. It'll be thriving much more with what we're doing, because this is the next level.
This is the next level, he says. Brian?
I don't, the whole like let him off the hook capitulation thing doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, he slapped enormous tariffs on these guys, got the world's attention, and then said, we're going to back off and negotiate for 90 days and take it down to 30%. And all of a sudden, the same people who said he was crazy for going in big are now saying he's weak for coming back. You can't have it both ways. I agree that there was a lot of uncertainty that was created by all of this, but the uncertainty has created the space for everybody to come to the table. And I think that's a good thing. And if the momentary sort of blip we had in the market is the price to pay to get people to the table for better deals, who's going to say no to that? I don't think America's going to say no to that, frankly.
Okay, so we're all watching this stock market. And I think a lot of people at home are wondering, if this is such a good thing, are we only going to see markets go higher from here? Your prediction, sir.
I mean, I think if the trade war and the huge tariffs across the board and these embargoes actually take a hold, and we can actually get small businesses to get ready for back to school, get ready for Christmas shopping, then yeah.
Don't say that.
Well, that's what they have.
He's
by the
thinking
way,
way ahead here.
No, that's what they're doing for in supply chain right now. That's what they're ordering.
100%.
So I think if we get to somewhat business as usual, yeah, I think we can have a vibrant market again. But that's a huge if. This is a 90-day pause. This is a huge if.
I don't know. It sounds like an optimistic Robert Wolf statement to me.
See, I mean, you just get him in here and talk with him a couple minutes, and all of a sudden he's a bull again. Yeah. This is great.
Final, will you give us a prediction of some sort?
Well, I'll tell you
Brian?
one thing. It's not going to be business as usual. Okay, it's going to be a different kind of business. We've been focused on the tariffs. We're missing the growth piece of this. We've already invoked Larry's name once. To me, the story in 2025 is going to be growth when Congress gets this tax bill through and businesses have a really strong incentive.
And don't forget regulations. I mean, they've rolled back a lot of these regulations that is going to take months, if not years, in some of these industries for us really to feel the effects of that.
I don't want to be negative, but the tax bill is going to have more hurdles than we think.
You were doing so well there.
Yeah, no,
I had to end.
You were doing so well.
Get back on the track.
I appreciate both of you. Thank you very much. All right.
Just think of where we were a year ago. The contrast could not be clearer. And that's the angle. And now we're going to take you inside these China trade negotiations. We're joined by U.S. Trade Rep Jamieson Greer for his first interview since returning from those high-stakes meetings with Chinese officials in Geneva. Mr. Ambassador, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, in the last week, we went from China not coming to the negotiating table to now getting this pause and what we hope is ultimately a real deal. And Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, told us last week that this meeting was going to be about de-escalating. So take us inside and what really happened to get us to this moment.
Well, thanks, Laura. It's great to be here, too. I'm fresh off the plane from Geneva, so I'm happy to give you insight into all of this. The first thing to understand is that there's been a lot of work behind the scenes that went on before we had these meetings, outreach, official and unofficial, between the two sides. as we were feeling each other out, seeing if there's a way to move forward. Remember, when President Trump declared reciprocal tariffs on April 2nd, he assigned China a tariff of 34%. And everyone else said that they wanted to negotiate with us. They did not retaliate or did not implement retaliation. Everyone except for China. China went ahead and they implemented 34%. The president needed to make sure that his action was going to work, so he had to adjust it again upwards, and then China started escalating. And so that's why we got to the point of needing to have a heart-to-heart with the Chinese side, and why we put in so much work to get there, and this weekend had a very pragmatic outcome.
Well, the Global Times, which you know is the mouthpiece for the CCP, wrote today that this also shows that through the fight and talk during this period of time, the U.S. now has a deeper understanding of the correct way to deal with China. Mr. Ambassador, not only that comment, but a lot of headlines, I know you've seen them, that this constituted the administration backing away from an untenable tariff position, and that y'all were forced back on your heels by the Wall Street response and by the business response to what these tariffs were doing to some of their critical goods that they needed to manufacture here in the United States.
Well, Laura, the critics, we keep disproving them so quickly, they just can't keep up. Remember, just like I said, the president imposed a 34% tariff on China originally and very quickly moved to a 10% pause on the world. And by the way, his entire campaign, he said he wanted to put a 10% global tariff on the world with higher tariffs on China, around 50, 60%. And guess where we are today? All in on China, it's about 50%, and it's 10% all the world. So he's doing exactly what he said. The only reason that the tariffs went so sky high to begin with was because of Chinese retaliation, which was disproportionate and inappropriate. But of course, we were able to get together with the Chinese, have very clear-eyed and realistic discussions with them to get things back to where we need to go. So the president's plan is being carried out exactly how he wanted it to be.
I want to get to that 50% and how you arrived at that in a moment. But your friend, former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, worked in Obama administration and for Clinton, of course, had some comments on CNN today about the deal. Watch.
It's President Trump who blinked. China didn't make any consequential or significant change. Sometimes it's good to blink. When you make a mistake, it's usually best to correct it and retreat, even if it's a little bit embarrassing. So I applaud the actions that were taken over the weekend. I credit Secretary Bessent for his leadership, which he showed over the weekend.
China expert, now someone you know well, Gordon Chang, also said this is essentially a win for China and that all these Chinese goods are still going to come into our country where ours remain shut out from their markets. Mr. Ambassador, a lot of our friends are skeptical about this. I'm not trying to be a, naysayer here, but what's going on?
Well, again, remember, President Trump, when he imposed tariffs on the world, China just being one part of that, the intent was to have tariff levels that drive down the trade deficit. Now, remember, China really was the first target of President Trump in 2018. He imposed tariffs of about 25% on most goods coming in from China, including on steel and aluminum and a host of other high technology products. Those were still in place. Earlier this year, he put on tariffs of 20% on fentanyl. Then he put on the 34%. And to be clear, that 34% could still happen, right? China has now qualified for the pause, and so it has a 10% tariff and has a 90-day pause to negotiate with them. But if things don't work out, those tariffs can go back up. I think the Chinese are really focused on a deal, and they want to move forward constructively, and that's why they're now able to, have the 10%. But all these measures from before are still in place, and so
you're counting
when I hear
those.
People,
yeah. So you're just to be clear, you're counting.
Well, they apply.
Right. Of course they are,
yes.
And we support them 115%. We support them, but you're counting that when you get to 50, you're counting the old tariffs that were in place that Biden didn't lift, correct?
That's right, because we have a host of measures in place on China. That's exactly right. And so when you look at the world, President Trump has imposed significant tariffs on China, substantially more than they have. And this exercise over the past weekend was focused on that reciprocal tariff matter where the Chinese escalated so quickly and the president matched them. All the other measures, we have a lot of complaints about China. They have things we do, they don't like. Those are things to discuss in the future potentially.
Our goal is to get jobs in this country, President Trump's goal, jobs in this country, and reduce that trade deficit. So that's what we've been focused on I have for like 25 years. So this is what I care about deeply, deeply. Now, it's unclear, Mr. Ambassador, in the announcement today, whether China has lifted or has pledged to lift restrictions on its exports of things like rare earths, magnets, other industrial goods that are essential for U.S. manufacturers to have access to. What's the story about those? Because people keep asking me specifically about the magnets and all of those other critical materials.
Yep, the Chinese, they have agreed to remove those countermeasures. So when the administration put the 34% on China, China retaliated with 34%. Plus other countermeasures like the kinds you talked about. And therefore, our mission this weekend was not only to get the tariffs down to a more rational rate, but also to require the Chinese to remove their countermeasures, which they've agreed to do. And guess what? If they don't do those things, we're going to be back in a different situation. But I expect they will remove them.
Were you surprised that President Trump was as optimistic about China and China living up to what it essentially has agreed to in your meetings, given kind of what China didn't follow through on with COVID? Are you surprised that the president is that optimistic?
Well, no. We have a two-step here. First, we have the agreement of this weekend, which is to have them lift their tariffs and lift their countermeasures, which is something concrete, quantifiable, observable, that's going to happen this week. So that is something where we have trust. And then the next step is to enter into talks, broadly speaking, to see if they'll open up their economy. Now on that is a long-term project. That's something where we've had promises before and they haven't delivered. That being said, President Trump is speaking with power and in a way that the Chinese Communist Party understands. It's not just soft words like other administrations have used. It's real power and real leverage that the president's wielding.
Mr. Ambassador, you've had marathon meetings. We really appreciate you taking the time to come on tonight. These are complicated issues, and you help clarify them. Thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.